Hello, everyone, and welcome to the IT On Call podcast. I'm your host, Ross, to the rescue, Feldman. My company is Better Call IT. If business technology is your headache, Better Call IT is your Advil. It's a pleasure to have you here, Christian. How are you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Christian Nichles of One Gen Solutions. Tell everybody, what is One Gen Solutions?
Yeah, so we are a consulting and coaching firm that is basically we can speak, coach, or train in generational acuity in any sector, any workplace where multiple generations are present.
Very cool. So, what is generational acuity?
Yeah. So I think most people would be familiar with the term generational diversity, which is still a fair assumption and thought. Um, But our company, we, instead of focusing on those things that make us different, we chose to use the word acuity because acuity means not only learning, but it means appreciating. And so our goal isn't just to help a millennial fit in at work. Our goal is to help a boomer understand a millennial and appreciate what they bring to the table. And a millennial, like respecting a Gen Xer and thinking, hey, they've been at this company 10 years more than I have, so I can learn from them. And so it's really just about our focus is about education, yes, but really and truly breaking down the walls of things that hinder productivity, like communication, like cultural understanding, things like what matters in a workplace ethos. You know, like, do you want a desk out in the room or do you want an office with a door that you can shut? Simple things like that we don't always think about when we look at workplace productivity, but simple adjustments generationally can actually boost your production without many other things that you have to buy or purchase or continue to put money into.
That's so true. And, you said there's five generations in the workplace today. And, you know, whatever boomer is still a popular phrase. Like, I grew up, so I did help desk. I was on desk side. And the gentleman that I worked with was literally 10 years older than I was. He was Gen Xer. I'm a Zennial. I'm a Gen X millennial. And he had a different work ethic. A work order would come in and he would kind of just sit there and like, I'll get to it when I get to it. And I was always like, work order come in, go, 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 And so it was like, and he's like, he was kind of like, hey, you got to slow down because you're making me look bad. And I'm like, hey, you're making me look bad. You're the one sitting on your rear end. Many generations in the workplace, and his kid was 10 years older than my kid because I'm 10 years younger than him. So like my kid's 10 now, his kid's 20, going off to college, all that sort of stuff. Like it's one of those things that we just, we connected as friends. We're still friends. We talk sometimes, but it was just like our families were at just different phases.
Yeah.
What do you see? What's the latest generation coming in called today, and what are you seeing happening with them in the workplace?
Yeah, so we actually, January 1st of 2025, began a new generation called Generation Beta. And again, very early. They're the oldest of them are just over a month old.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so again, a lot of it is speculation, but there's also a lot of research already begun. Generational understanding is a fairly new concept. And it's a fairly westernized concept. Globally, generations are looked at vastly different than here in the United States. And yeah, we have five generations that are possible, most likely are present in the workforce. And we have three generations, one about to enter, one that's, 10 years off or 15 years off, and then one that's 15, 16 years after that. And so the actual art, the science, what it takes to measure a generation and look at a generation is shifting. And we're just learning in my field of generational understanding, we're just learning how to study a generation better. And it's interesting. Like one of the questions that I get asked a lot is how does a generation come to get its name? Like, well, how does it do that? Which is a great question. How do we do that? And really, it's simple. It is mostly around a global cultural marker. So how did the boomers get their name?
Hmm.
Well, let's back up. How did the builders, right? That would be the generation that had the boomers. So how did they get their name builder? Well, because they built a country back. They built an economy back. They built housing developments. They built businesses that were totally destroyed and done away with. And um, so then they had kids, right? Boomers. Well, there was a baby boom. A lot of people coming home from the war. A lot of these builders were having a bunch of babies. And it was like, wow, we've got to repopulate the earth because, again, the global pressure of your first and second World War veterans, where there is a group of people that will take over the world and we need to outnumber them. And so there was this really hard push globally, even, but specifically in America, there was a lot of patriotism and pride in having a lot of children. It
Hmm.
meant you were a good American. And so that's how the baby boomers, well, then, the baby boomers had us Gen Xers. I'm a proud Gen Xer, which you rarely hear about, right? It's like we always talk about boomers and millennials, but Gen Xers tend to not, and that's just who we are. We are the X's. We are the ones who were latchkey kids. Both of our parents worked in an economy trying to build. Thinking about the first Great Recession. And so both of my parents worked. Most parents did. I was sitting in front of we had this TV at my house that probably weighed 500 pounds. And it was 5 or 6 feet long, but the screen was smaller than what we're on right here. And I remember sitting there one day after school and I saw MTV come on for the very first time. I heard the music and I saw the flag plant. And so yeah, so us Xers, we're just kind of in the background. And then the Xers gave birth to millennials or Generation IY or Y or Zennial. There several different names actually, but millennials came about when at the turn of a millennial, and their life was rocked by 9/11. And so their life was deeply formed by this event that happened. Now we have collennials. So those people that were born, just a few, like 10, 20, 2010, 2012, somewhere in there, their whole school got corrupted by a COVID shutdown. And they remember life, being in hiding and wearing masks. And so there's a whole generation formed just by this one global event or this technological, advances like the iPhone and social media and all those things. And then, you get down to even Gen Alpha, Gen Z and Gen Alpha. These generations are we're barely, scratching the surface on what's really making them tick. But, they're way beyond AI. They're into virtual reality or even now augmented reality. And so, yeah, it's a lot of it's just conjecture, right? We just try to make some predictions and we try to look forward. But there's basically, for layman's terms, there's basically 7 characteristics that our company, One Gen Solutions, identify. So when we go in and we do a consultation, we do what we call a generational acuity assessment. And we measure 7 things. We measure the work ethic, the communication style, the cultural values, the work-life balance, results motivation, corporate loyalty, and mental health. Those are the
Wow.
7 markers. And when we do these things, the assessment is meant to not only identify what generations are present, but to identify how every generation views those 7 markers. And so you're doing an apples to apples comparison. So you talked about work ethic. It was interesting. I had a meeting with a Fortune 500 CEO and their human resource director. And it was pretty early on in this particular part of my career. And I was very, very, very passionate about helping generations work together. And so I'm in this office and he goes, the CEO goes, I just can't get these lazy millennials to work.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I said, well, that's interesting. And his reply was, why is that interesting? I said, well, all the research and data shows that millennials are actually the largest demographic of humans who give their time to charity.
Mm.
So on the weekends, they're working soup kitchens and stuff like that for free. He goes, okay. I said, so in layman's terms, they would rather work for free on the weekends for someone else than Monday to Friday in your office here for money.
For you. Yeah.
And I thought to myself, right after that last word came out of my mouth, I was like, I'm probably not going to do well here. This contract is not getting signed today. But actually, it got signed
Wow.
because the CEO realized that there's something about this generation that it seems like they're lazy, but they're not. They'll
Mm.
work really hard for something that they think is very purposeful. And
Mm.
so part of generational understanding is just finding out these things, how they tick, what has developed them, and then make the adjustments in your workplace that go, hey, this is something that you could tweak very easily, and you're probably going to have a better ethos here. Your culture is going to shift. People are going to enjoy work again, and it's really hard for people to wrap their mind around that because they've tried so many workforce development initiatives, and they've had consultants in, and they've hired coaches, but if you're still developing people the way you did 15 years ago, you're not developing people anymore.
No.
And so that's the fun of what I do. I love that I get to continue learning myself, and then get to share that with other people. And yeah, I can't wait. My grandson is due any day now, and he's going to be a Gen Beta, and I can't wait to watch him and learn from him and learn about him as his life unfolds.
That's so funny. You talk about the iPhone generation. So I'm gonna go on my little tangent. I didn't have the iPhone first. I had a Palm Trio,
Huh?
and before that, I had a Palm Pilot, Sony Clio. I had a calculator watch. I had a little address book, digital address book, little keeper, pocket keeper. I always had technology in my life. I had dial. I was very fortunate to have dial-up internet as a child. I was connected to the internet. My parents had a small business. They needed someone to do tech support. I was the youngest one, so naturally, accidental IT. That's how I started. A lot of millennials today, they become accidental IT to their families and to the businesses that they work at because they're the youngest. But I grew up with Outlook and Outlook Express, and these kids, they grew up with iPhones and Gmail. They have no idea how to use Microsoft products. They don't, they barely know a Windows computer if one came up and hit them. So, it's one of those. A lot of these people become accidental IT, and that's where I come in, and I come and clean up the mess as best as I can, and come to modernize the business. I just got off the phone with a business that found me on Google. They Googled me, and boom, here we go.
Yeah.
So it's the new day.
Yeah, it's interesting, Ross. I try to get people to, again, understand and appreciate. And so I know younger generations like kind of get somewhat frustrated, and maybe it's just quip, we're just quipping. But this whole, if you buy mom and dad or grandparents a new VCR, which even that dates me, right? Then I'm going to have to go program the remote for them, right? They're going to call me every time they can't get the TV to turn on. And when I hear that, I look at those people and I go, do you know how much courage and humility it took for them to call you about a TV?
Mm.
And it may have come across frustration. It may have come across, but when you understand humanity and when you understand the seasons of life. So my educational background, I have a doctorate in human growth and development. And when you understand that someone who's lived 70 years, they were in complete control of their life at some point, and they were making all the decisions, and they were facing all the circumstantial things that would happen and consequences of those decisions. But when you reach a certain age, you begin to not be in control of things.
Mm.
People take your driver's license, or you get put in a home so you lose your home that you bought and paid for and lived in, raised your family in. And so I try to just get younger people to understand that, okay, I know they're a little crabby and grouchy some, but just think of what they've been through in their life and what they've
Mhm.
experienced and how that, and learn from that. And I do the same in reverse mentoring. When, I hear older people go, well, they just, all they want to be is on their devices and this, and they don't pay attention and they don't look you in the eye and they don't shake your hand. And I go, well, who handed them the device? We've created the monster that we don't like all of a sudden.
Oh
And,
yeah, oh yeah.
and,
My
and
my
so,
son My son's 10 years old. He's had a phone and a tablet since he was 4. He's been on Roblox the whole time.
yeah.
And it was like, it was a fight between my wife and I about shoving the device in his hand the minute he gets in the car. When she would drive, it was immediate. When I would drive, I'd keep it in the front seat until he either asked for it or needed it.
Hmm.
And, we had two different parenting styles. And that's the thing that happens a lot with millennial more than any generation is we grew up like you had a lot of latchkey for Gen X. So they probably both spouse and partner have that experience. But
Hmm.
with the millennials, they probably maybe like she grew up with TV dinners. I grew up with only dinner at the dinner table, no TV. So, everybody has different lifestyles that they
Right.
came from that they're trying to merge into a new household.
Yeah, for sure. And again, a lot of generational understanding is somewhat broad stroked and maybe is not specific to specific people. For instance, my wife and I are both Gen Xers, but she grew up vastly different than I did. I was an only child. She's one of 4. My parents were not wealthy, but I mean upper middle class for sure. Professional careers.
Hmm.
Her parents, her mom was kind of a stay at home mom, and her dad was a sheet metal worker. And they lived in a small house that her dad built with his own hands, and by the way, they still live there today. And so, yeah, it was just vastly different. And so, even in the fact that my wife and I are both Gen Xers, some of our experiences, again, I was sitting there watching when the flag planted on MTV. She didn't get to watch cable growing up. She didn't see cable or have a, I bought her first cell phone. I had a bag phone in my mini lowrider truck in high school. And so, but she had never had anything like that. And so there are definite, things that you can say specifically that don't apply to certain generations or to certain, people in a generation. And so we have to understand that as well, that some generational understanding is broad stroked, very generalized. But there are, again, we identified these 7 factors so that we wouldn't do apples to oranges comparisons. We would do apples to apples. How does a boomer feel about mental health? Well, for the most part, they're like, toughen up, you just,
Tough it up, Buttercup.
yeah, toughen up and go on. Let's go. We work. That's what we do. Doesn't matter how you feel, whatever. And you ask a Gen Zer, about mental health. Oh, mental health is very important to me. Like I read this book recently called The Anxious Generation. It's a great book. And in that book, Jonathan Haidt is the author. And in that book, he has this part that says, and this is paraphrase, I'm not quoting. He says that the average normal amount of anxiety that a teenager lives with right now. So just your average, my son, my youngest kid is 14, my oldest is 24. So my son, the average anxiety that he just deals with every single day as part of his everyday life would have institutionalized him in the late 50s.
Hmm.
And so you're like, wow. When I hear people say, well, we've raised a bunch of snowflakes, they're weak. I'm like, do you know how mentally strong they have to be
Right,
to
right. To
live in
deal
this
to deal with
world?
the pressures of, to deal with the pressures of today, the pressures of social media, the pressures of like I'm sitting here and my phone is just blowing off. It is just blowing up, and
Yeah.
like that could be
Hadn't
stressful.
stopped.
Yeah, yeah. I'm getting phone calls, I'm getting emails, I'm getting text messages, and it's like I also suffer from ADD. So it's like takes me all my energy just to focus on the one thing I'm trying to get done, let
Yeah.
alone getting interrupted constantly. And
Yeah.
I'm Ross to the rescue, so I'm always on and always connected and always available to everybody who's trying to reach out to me, and that's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah. And their
So
whole lives have been lived out for everybody to see. It's, and again, who created this monster? We did. I'll give you what you said a second ago. It reminded me. So I'll give you an example of generational misunderstanding. When I was about 12 or 13 years old, my parents had me at the doctor's office. I tended to get into trouble. I was quite mischievous. And again, I was born in 76. And so a lot's changed over the years, but I was probably 10 or 11. So this would have been the mid 80s, somewhere in there. And we're at the doctor, and the doctor tells my parents that I have ADHD. And both of my parents just go, okay. And so the doctor turns around and he says, well, I'm going to give you a prescription and you just take this to your drugstore. And my dad said, whoa, what's he getting a prescription for? He says, for his ADHD. And my dad said, well, what is that? He said, that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which was very, very new in the mid 80s. Like, that was not a common diagnosis. And so he said, so I'm writing this prescription. And my dad, no lie, this is exactly what my dad did. He said, there's no need for that, doc. And he showed his belt and his belt buckle. And he said, I have a prescription to get his attention. Right?
That's painful. That's painful, man.
Like, is that not? And again, my dad loved me, cared for me. Like, it wasn't like he was a terrible, neglective parent. He was a boomer. And he was raised fairly poor, and he had 8 brothers and sisters. And the way that discipline was handed down was with a strap of leather. And that was just, I was acting bad because I wasn't behaving. There couldn't have been any neurodivergence. Now you just fast forward, and now you've got kids that are overly medicated, that it's become so easy. And I think, like you said, go to a restaurant, go anywhere. And if there's a couple that has one of their young kids with them, they've got an iPad in their hand watching a movie.
Yeah.
And it's loud, and they don't have earphones in, so everybody can hear the movie. And
oh no.
Yeah, I'm like, so again, I just said something right there. As a person who appreciates generational, acuity, I still catch myself going, can you turn that down? Like, what is,
that's rude.
Why do you have that? A car went by our house the other night, and it was just booming. I mean, it was just, the bass was so loud, it was shaking our windows. And, I go, what in the world is that noise? And I forgot that when I was 16 in my little lowrider truck, that I had 15s right behind my seats, that my dad would say, why is that got to be so loud? You're shaking the windows when you come home. So yeah, it's interesting how we kind of grow and develop into our parents. There's these commercials now. It's an insurance company. We can't stop you from becoming like your parents or whatever.
Great commercial.
Yeah, it's so funny to me because I find myself kind of being grouchy sometimes. I'm almost 50 and about to be a granddad. And it's like, I want to be young. Like, I have I have a Jordan shoe collection, and I wear jeans and a hoodie when it's cold, and I wear jeans and a Columbia fishing shirt when it's hot. And I'm always wear sneakers. And so for me, like, to put a coat on to go to a proposal or into a client's office, like, I hate it. I just absolutely hate it, but I get it. Like, I feel like I need to at least try to connect somewhere in that world while staying true to myself. And I think generations that are emerging are going to actually come back around, if you know what I mean by that. Like,
right.
Technology is not going away. I just read a study last week, 68, I think, or 67 point something % of Gen Zers wish that social media was never invented.
Ooh, yeah.
But they're on it. They posted this study because they're on it.
Speaking of social media, I was there at the inception. I was in college, 2004, 2005, when Facebook came out. MySpace was all the rage. Friendster was around, Blogger, LiveJournal. And my wife will attest to, she met a friend through LiveJournal, right? That she stayed connected with for 25 years. And for me, my Facebook has my whole history from 2005 to today. So 20 years of history.
Mm-hmm.
It's impactful. And I see all the time people quitting Facebook and making a big announcement about it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, everybody, you're not going to hear from me anymore. I'm closing my Facebook page. I'm leaving this whole thing. And I'm like, I don't like my Facebook run my life. It's just a tool in my tool case. It's a
Yeah.
screwdriver. It's a hammer. It's the way it's the way I stay connected with my alumni. And that's how we, stay connected. And I use Facebook Messenger. Hell, I use my son uses Facebook Messenger. That's how we chat with each other. So,
Yeah.
it's a tool. It's a tool.
Well,
Just treat it as such.
and this is what I tell young people, especially, but adults, whoever. What we have to understand about social media is that's everyone's highlight reel. And I mean, there are some people who are more vulnerable, but still, even most of that is I'm fishing for somebody to ask me what's going on or what's happening or why I feel this way or whatever. But I tell people all the time, don't compare your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel.
100%. 100%. That was actually my cover photo for a few years. So it's
Yeah,
good.
it's like whatever. And in a world where I think Michael Hyatt was the one who originally said this, but I steal it all the time, that everything you put on social media is instant, global, and permanent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's not going to. I have a friend that I went to college with. His entire job, his career, is he works for a staffing company, and his job is to research people's social media.
Mm.
That's all he does. He takes an
Wow.
applicant and he goes
Right.
online and he finds out every single thing about them that he can find out, hands it back to the recruiting person or the HR person or the CEO, whoever's hiring. And he puts a report up like, this is what, and I try to get people to see that, like you can watch your whole life kind of unfold on that. And so if a recruiter or somebody in the workplace looks at let's say your college days, and you're complaining about your professor all the time. This professor's dumb. I can't stand his class, blah, 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 whatever. I'm not doing that assignment. It's ridiculous. And they look at that and go, oh, so when your project manager hands you an assignment, are you going to get on Facebook and talk about them and degrade them and say it's stupid? And we don't really think about that stuff, but it happens. And to me, they're the generations since millennials. So, you've got your Gen Z, your Gen Alpha, and your Gen Beta now. They're going to have to make major adjustments to what they put on social media and what they hold close. And millennials didn't get that memo, and they're paying for it now. Many of them, they're now Gen Z is the most fired demographic in the American workplace today.
Amen.
But millennials are the biggest demographic that job hop, because they run into that. I don't know how to deal with some of this contentious behavior, and I don't like confrontation, and that's fine. Like I get it. I don't either. But they've never really been taught that. And they've never really been taught the soft skills that it takes to communicate, to look you in the eye, to shake your hand. Like I said earlier, when someone says that to me, I go, well, we let them not learn these things. We were the ones that said, just put them on an iPad and they'll be fine. And so a lot of it is educational. A lot of what I do is just simply educating people to know that not everything is bad. Not everything is good. There are good things and there are bad things, and navigating both sides of those are a sign not only of maturity, but they're a sign of humility and growth, to be able to say, I think I can learn from this person. Or I think I just got off a call before we got on here. I was on a call with someone who's in my field and has been in my field for 35 years. And I was like, and they were kind and gracious, and they're like, man, you know what to do. You're doing this. I'm like, no, I want to hear from you. What do you see? What are you hearing? And so just learning to learn again, I think is going to be very important. We are no longer adults in particular, but older adults. We're no longer like the dispensers of knowledge and information. You said somebody Googled you, right? They don't need me. They don't need encyclopedias. They can Google whatever, but they don't know what to do with the knowledge now. They have the information available to them, but they don't know what to do with it. And so I try to help try to help older generations figure out what are ways that I can be a tour guide rather than a boss. How can I help
Yes.
them understand the path it takes to be successful, and not just hand them do this, do that, do this, don't do this, don't do that, which is information, right? It's content. So
Right.
how do we shift our thinking in leadership circles to invest in their path rather than in their education? Which is it doesn't sound like a significant shift, but it really is.
Hmm.
And those that are doing it are doing really well. There are companies right now just knocking it out of the park when it comes to these generational issues. Many of them are doing it very intentionally, and then
Right.
some of them just, like anything, they just kind of tripped and fell into it and said, "Oh, this works." But you're going to hear of it more and more. I'm a member of the Maxwell Leadership Group, and most people know who John Maxwell is. He's been doing leadership for 40 years, 50 years. And even in our circles in the Maxwell Group, there are people beginning to talk and say, one of the aspects of the workplace is this intergenerational component that we need to start focusing on. And so when a company like Maxwell begins to say this is an important thing for businesses and leadership, then the world should probably pay attention to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, again, it's a young field. It's very early, so especially in the coaching and consulting world. But you're going to begin to see it more and more as younger generations continue to grow. Let's see, probably about 45% of the workforce now is under 40. And so that's going to continue to change very, very rapidly as boomers die or retire, as Gen Xers now are beginning to die and retire. So you lack all these leadership skills, and so it's not going away. Like, you
Nope.
can't put a Band-Aid on the problem. You can't hope we'll stumble into a better way to do it. It's going to take companies doing some very intentional things to understand the dynamics of the human beings that are working there.
Absolutely. And it's one of those that we're gonna have to be open-minded to the workplace and to what everybody brings value and what value they bring. So
Yes.
definitely,
Right.
I mean, Christian, it's been a great education. I appreciate you taking time to come onto the podcast. If people want to reach out to you to learn more, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can visit my webpage, www.the1gensolutions.com. I'm on all social media handles, Christian Nichles. You can find that. And you can email me at christian@onegensolutions.com.
Awesome. I'm Ross Feldman. You can reach my schedule at scheduleross.com. I'm available for consultation. It can be by phone, by over coffee, a bite to eat, Zoom. I'm very flexible. Check it out. And we are going to continue this podcast. We have a few more guests lined up over the next few months, and it's going to be epic. And I'm glad to have this episode in the can. So thanks again, Christian.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ross. Love what you're doing, man.
Pleasure.